sitting of the first session of the Fourth House of Assembly continues on day 3. This House is now in session. I have one apology from the Junior Minister for Tourism, who is traveling, and I have no other apologies from members who are not here, besides the Honorable Maduro Kane, member from the 6th District, who is under the weather. I take it today also that our late start is because of the inclement weather, so we'll try to be out of here at least by 10 p.m., the latest. We will continue this afternoon as we debate the Beneficial Ownership Secure Search System Amendment Number 2, Act 2019. And before the debate starts, let me ask all members humbly and politely to allow members to speak without unnecessary interruption, chattering in the chambers, and any unnecessary agitation. At this time, I recognize the Deputy Premier and Minister for Transportation, Works and Utilities, and member for the 5th District, the Honorable Kai M. Reimer, to make his contribution to the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as we're here on this rainy Emancipation Friday, I want to offer my contribution to this debate, Mr. Speaker. Last night, we wrapped up hearing some information or direction relating to what should be done going forward for our territory. Spoke in depth about the do's and the don'ts and the have and the have-nots. And, Mr. Speaker, it was mentioned that we must address our local companies and offer a level playing field, because we are at a crossroad. Mr. Speaker, I do agree. A report was also read last night pertaining to a document that was published. Mr. Speaker, it was regarding Sun Sea, and I can't remember the rest of the article. But a lot of the article speak about the truth about our territory in regards to our roads, road signage, fouls and cars. And Mr. Speaker, you know, sometimes the truth hurts. The truth hurts. But it is what we do thereafter. How do we address these situations? And Mr. Speaker, as you mentioned, we shouldn't be here longer than 10 o'clock. I hope we don't go that far. And Mr. Speaker, I hope to be brief regarding this, my contribution. But allow me to read some from my notes, Mr. Speaker.
Proceed.
And I want to applaud this government as we are 5 months plus in. The report came out at our infancy stage, and you know, like everyone expected, we are supposed to take everything, and everything would actually be labeled to us eventually if we don't do something about it. And the report came out. But I want to acknowledge my government, this government, your government, because, Mr. Speaker, we addressed a lot of those concerns in that article. I'm not sure how publicized it was. But I want to applaud the Premier and his team and his government, and especially Ms. Elise Donovan. She addressed a lot of the concerns, and I'll read her opening paragraph to to that report. It says, the BVI supports initiatives to fight financial crime. And it says the description of the BVI in the Bloomberg Business Week bears no resemblance to the innovative and forward-thinking jurisdiction into which the BVI has developed over recent decades. We appreciate the corrections that have already been made. However, there are still a number of misleading statements and inaccuracies. And Mr. Speaker, I want to highlight that because hearing what we look like hurt. But Mr. Speaker, it's what we will do thereafter. The members that made their contributions last night, they've all served in government. And they have had the opportunity. And Mr. Speaker, last night when it was being presented, I listened and I was wondering, well, what is the solution to how we can get these ideas and these issues sorted out? And Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure if at that time members were too consumed, but at that time I think it was fitting for them to try to address the situation, but that time has passed. And I want to say there's a time and a place for everything. And I refer to the immigration bill that we debated. And some members talked about the House was not the right setting for us to have this bill and these amendments. And I could interject that if members had these concerns, maybe an informal setting to discuss how we can move our territory in the direction that will complement what the rest of the world say that we are in terms of the monies that pass through our economies. Well, Mr. Speaker, we have the opportunity, and we are an unconventional government. And I applaud the member for bringing out those issues. And I welcome them to actually bring forth these solutions, and let us bring the amendments to this House so that we can properly regulate the industry based on their suggestions, and to see how these companies can contribute, and we can actually see the results here within our territory. Mr. Speaker, and again, I applaud the Premier and the government, because we can't afford for our image to just be tarnished, because it's not, the document went further into, not seeing or seeing the money dripping off of different corners in different jurisdictions who are tax havens and so forth. And Mr. Speaker, based on my research, I know this government has always been trying very hard to be as transparent as possible with the financial services. And Mr. Speaker, I look forward, like I said, to the members. I guess we can start in the informal sessions where we can plot our way forward for a territory. They are both experienced, or they are all experienced. But Mr. Speaker, we came here to debate the Beneficial Ownership Secure Search System Act. And Mr. Speaker, I want to stand in support of these amendments, in support of this bill. And you always hear about the BOSS system and the BOSS beneficial ownership system. And I went and I did some review, Mr. Speaker, and allow me to read further. Based on the research, it says that the BOSS system is the first of its kind in the world. And the BVI has gained worldwide recognition in the private sector, the OECD, the EU, for the impressive capabilities of this BOSS system. It says the BOSS system has the highest level of security available to non-military application protecting data. This BOSS system was designed by the government of the Virgin Islands in order to comply with the exchange of notes signed between the BVI government and the UK government in 2016. Mr. Speaker, this BOSS system is the first step in the British Virgin Islands' move towards a more sophisticated financial services sector that utilizes information technology to increase the competitiveness of the BVI financial services sector, and which allow the BVI government to regulate the financial services sector even more efficiently. And Mr. Speaker, the amendments to this BOSS Act, it would allow for economic substance data to be stored in a dedicated part of BOSS that will only be accessible by the International Tax Authority, and will allow the software to identify companies that must have economic substance automatically. Mr. Speaker, I mentioned the ITA. And the ITA, it will be able to monitor and enforce the provisions of the economic substance law through the electronic storage and analysis of information using information technology on all BVI entities. Mr. Speaker, it's about over 400,000 of them. And this would not be possible without an IT platform to do this work for the ITA staff. And the ITA staff will thus be required only to run tests on the system and use the information provided by the system to make decisions and enforce the law, or where there are problems, to look at the individual problems. Mr. Speaker, this bill is important. This bill is important to this territory. Mr. Speaker, what was debated last night had some great points. And we need to work towards getting more out of these companies for our people. It was also discussed where businesses or companies in the BVI should also have the same ability or as the member mentioned, a company going to gain insurance for a vehicle. They ask everything. And if that's the case, that needs to be addressed. Because now you would have to access the BOSS system to get information about companies that are registered here. So, Mr. Speaker, those are things that we must address. But this bill specifically speaks to beneficial ownership. And its amendments. So, Mr. Speaker, as I said, I will be brief and allow for other members to have their input. But I think is at this stage a necessary bill, and we all should join in and support this bill. Because, as it's coming up on our 2-year anniversary where we went through these Category 5 hurricanes. And we were sitting here in the house the other night, and it started to thunder, and members started to get a bit nervous. We are still shell-shocked as to what we went through. We are still in the rebuilding stages. But we are a resilient people. And we don't give up. So, Mr. Speaker, I ask for members, I ask for the communities to join in for us to continue to build this territory. We don't give up, and we will never give up. And Mr. Speaker, I said thank you for your time and for this contribution. Thank you.
I thank the Deputy Premier and Minister for Transportation, Works and Utilities and member for the 5th District for his contribution. I now recognize the Minister for Education, Culture, Youth Affairs, Fisheries and Agriculture, and member for the 7th District, Dr. the Honorable Natalio D. Whitley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to debate these important amendments on the Beneficial Ownership Secure Search System Amendment Act 2019. Mr. Speaker, this is the first piece of financial services legislation that this new government, this new administration has brought to the House of Assembly. It is therefore important, Mr. Speaker, that we set the correct tone. We are at a very precarious place in the development of this territory, and we are at a precarious place as it pertains to the financial services industry in general. It's important for us to be very cautious in terms of how we express ourselves on this issue, especially as members of government. Of course, the opposition have a role to play. But I would hope, Mr. Speaker, that the long tradition that has existed in this House of showing a great deal of unity on the financial services arena, that would continue with this iteration of the House of Assembly. And I might add, Mr. Speaker, I would like to see some other areas where we expand that unity that we have expressed traditionally in the financial services area. Let's expand those to some other areas as well. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, I want to make reference to the member for the 3rd District and his comments. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that the member for the 3rd District made some very powerful points in his presentation. And I have to say, Mr. Speaker, that I have a great deal of admiration for the member. I appreciate the perspective of not just wanting to clean the boat, but to own it. I would have to say that's my viewpoint as well. He also mentioned about not just consuming the products, but manufacturing the products. And I agree with him that we have set our sights too low. And that we have accepted a limited role. We have accepted a subordinate role in the economic development of our society and the global economy. We have settled for the crumbs from the table. I agree with him completely there. But I have to challenge some of the sentiments that I heard last night coming from the member. And this is despite my great admiration of him. The article that my ministerial colleague made reference to that was in Bloomberg, I don't think it benefits any of us to give any credence or any validity to it whatsoever. The writer skillfully misled the readership with that article, glossed over essential information, presented half-truths, and in some cases, outright falsehoods. I thought that the article was very damaging, and as Honorable Minister for Transportation said, Elise Donovan, the Director of BVI Finance, did a masterful job in rebutting what I would refer to as the nonsense pilfered in that article, disguising itself as journalism. I wasn't happy with that article at all.
Mr. Speaker, if the minister is going to associate me with falsehoods and half-truths, I'd like for him to quote the particular areas of the article that are false and that are half-truths.
Member for the 3rd, he's talking about the article itself that you referred to.
Mr. Speaker, he called my name, he referred to me. And
But the House.
I did.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. So let him quote the specific areas that are half-truths and are falsehoods.
Okay,
He has to.
No, he don't have to. If the member, you read an article written by a journalist, you used it in your presentation, and he is talking about that article was false to some extent. That's what his argument is.
Mr. Speaker, I was associated with the article which I read as being false and half-truths. The article, all the minister needs to do is point out to us those areas of the article that I read. I'm taking responsibility for the article now, the fact that I read it. I took responsibility for it. I read those portions of the article.
Okay.
So if they find half-truths in what I said and falsehoods, well then read it. Read the portion that I read that are half-truths and falsehoods.
Okay, I want the Minister for Education to be speaking without unnecessary interruption. Minister, if you're talking in general about the article, you need to be specific. If you're saying that what the senior member raised yesterday in his debate, that there were falsehood in specific areas that he raised, then you need to point that out. But if that's not what you're saying, then please clarify.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll clarify. I in no way refer to what the member said in his contribution as falsehoods or half-truths. Those comments that I just made were specifically reserved for the writer of that particular article. I understand what the member for the third was saying in his contribution. Unfortunately, I think with his contribution, and this is his right, and I certainly wouldn't take away that right, but I thought he gave a certain level of credence to and validity to the article. And in terms of referring to the half-truths of the article, I will refer to the rebuttal from Elise Donovan, and I will completely adopt her perspective as it pertains to analyzing that particular article. And certainly persons can find that article. I believe it's on the BVI government's website, as well as it was published in Bloomberg. If persons are interested specifically with what she had to say about the article. But I associate myself with the sentiments that Elise Donovan expressed in that article.
And your criticism is on the writer of the article?
On the writer of the article. In no way am I criticizing the honorable member of the 3rd District.
Good. Proceed without interruption.
For his sentiments. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to make it clear, Mr. Speaker, that the financial services industry has been good to the BVI. 60% of government revenue comes from the financial services industry. Perhaps some persons would like to see that number increase. I know it must have been last year or the year before we increased fees on the financial services industry, and that brought in some more money. Perhaps maybe you were saying instead of 60%, we want to see 70 or 80. But in my view, the financial services has more than done its part in the budget for the government, in providing employment, in renting buildings and lots of different things, Mr. Speaker. Now, I know that many of our persons see a glass ceiling in the industry. I know that. I know that perhaps we want our people to be able to rise higher in the industry, and we may have some issues here and there that we need to work on. But I see as well a BVI that has one of the highest per capita incomes in the region and in the world, has a higher per capita income than the United Kingdom. So for all of our criticisms, we must ever be mindful that the $180 million or so that the government receives from the financial services industry, that helps to pay lots of persons' salaries in the BVI. That helps, those salaries help to pay persons' mortgages, to build them these grand houses in the hills. despite the fact that the article spoke about hens and roosters competing with the traffic, I see lots of persons driving Range Rovers and BMWs in the BVI. Who that money has sent a lot of persons to school. I don't see many jurisdictions having $4 and $5 million for over 30,000, and all of those persons, of course, don't even have access to scholarships. Type of scholarships, the type of money we spend on scholarships. I would like to see a country that spends the amount of money on scholarships per capita that we do here. So we must make sure that our comments have a certain level of balance. We have to balance it. Now, I recognize many of the problems that we all can see in terms of our infrastructure, our education system. And if we want to make the argument that $180 million or so that we get from financial services, that it hasn't been managed well, well, I can unite with you there. I can agree with you there. I think it should be reflected more in our infrastructure, more in the skills of our people. It is actually shameful that we have had all of this money pass through the BVI, but yet we have so much problems with unemployment. That we don't have persons working in the tourism industry and the marine industry, in the construction industry. It is a shame, yes, that we haven't enforced the provisions of the work permits and all our different labor practices. All of these things are a shame. It's a shame, all the things the honorable member mentioned, where it's not reflected in our society. But who do we blame for those things? You know what? And it may seem as though I'm just saying we should blame ourselves. As the song from Lash and Dog said. Who to blame, who to blame? We have to take some responsibility for where we are. I wouldn't blame the financial services industry for that. And I'm also going to put some blame, some responsibility on the United Kingdom. Yes, I will. Because just the other day, Mr. Speaker, we were a subsistence economy, fishing and farming. And in an instant, we came into a whole set of money and started developing at a rapid pace. And it was just a matter of, we need a school, let's build a school. We need a port, let's build a port. We need this, we need that. But our people needed assistance in terms of a development strategy, an overall strategy. And the same national development plan that we're grappling with and wrestling with today, that should have happened 40 years ago. Our infrastructural development. You don't wait until you have buildings everywhere and cars everywhere to start to figure out, well, where are we going to put parking? These are things in terms of your development. You have to plan. The United Kingdom, they have been a developed country for a very long time. Where was the assistance? Where was the direction? It's not just a matter of sending somebody down here to try to control our finances or control our decision making or anything like that. Allow us to develop and to grow and give us guidance. Don't try to do it for us. Honorable Minister for Health and Social Development made reference to Article Tortola Times 1961, where a Minister of Parliament complained, a Minister of Parliament of the United Kingdom, about the neglect of the British Virgin Islands. They have been very negligent in helping to guide the BVI along the path of sustainable development. I do place some responsibility on them. Our people, many of us, our ancestors, they did well. They did very well. A good amount of them don't even have a secondary school education. And did the best that they could under the circumstances. So the financial services industry has been good to us. And we have to defend it. We have to defend the financial services industry. And that doesn't stop us from diversifying, and that doesn't stop us from adding other streams of revenue. That's our responsibility. We should not have been so reliant on the financial services industry until now. We threw away agriculture and fishing. We didn't pay attention to them at all because we had financial services there. That's our responsibility. That's something that we should have done. We're going to correct it. I'm not going to cast blame. We're here now, we're going to correct it. There are some persons out there in the global village who they have ideological differences with the financial services industry. They believe that we're eroding the tax base of these developed countries.
I'm sorry, senior member, what is the issue? No. No. According to the whip, there are 7 members in the chambers. Proceed, Minister for Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are groups of individuals who have ideological differences with the financial services industry. And they have been waging a campaign against places like the BVI for some time now. Now, I'm not saying that there's not any problems whatsoever with how the financial services industry has developed across the globe. But by and large, I believe that we have done well. We have done well in regulating the industry, and when issues come up, we seek to address them. You know, issue came up with the quote-unquote ring fencing, where they said, okay, you can't be charging tax on local business companies and not charging tax to international business companies. That issue came up, we addressed it. Perhaps we're not all happy about how it was addressed. We have issues with money laundering, we put regulations in place to address that. We have issues with terrorist financing, we put some issues in place to address that. And we have proven to be agile, adaptable, in the face of these challenges. And when it comes to tax transparency, when it comes to all the different regulations to address criminal activity, we're second to none. We compare favorably to even the OECD countries. We compare favorably. When you look at the standards of the Financial Action Task Force, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. But, Mr. Speaker, something happened that put us really on the back foot. We had a financial meltdown in the United States and other places. And the financial services industry became an easy scapegoat for all of the problems they experienced in the developed world. And all of a sudden now politicians found an issue that they can get elected on and to stave off their constituents who are suffering in their countries to a certain extent. And so you have the G7s and the G8s getting involved. Recently now we have this particular iteration of the UK Parliament getting involved and imposing public registers of beneficial ownership on the BVI. And you had Prime Minister David Cameron waging almost a war against us at one point. And now you have the European Union threatening us with blacklisting for what's called economic substance requirements. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that groups like Transparency International and all of these other NGOs have not really wanted to zero in on the true problem as it pertains to the finances in these countries. First of all, they have this concept called a harmful tax competition. And from an ideological standpoint, they don't believe that you should be able to offer more attractive tax benefits, for instance. You have these countries with huge amount of tax. And quite a lot of money they spend on things like the military, having these massive militaries around the world, going around messing with a whole set of people around the world. These massive investments in the military and other ways in which they spend their money. I like the NBA. I like basketball. And I've noticed that there are some players that sign contracts in certain states because a particular state in the United States doesn't have income tax. Like, let's take Texas, for instance. You might go and play in Texas because Texas doesn't have income tax. And you'll be able to see a lot more of your money than if you go play in, what's the latest one, in Canada, Toronto. Very high taxes. And so they compete, even the states compete among themselves to attract business, attract players based on the different tax benefits, you would say, they can offer to companies and individuals. And let's take a look at globalization while we're on that. For a long time, for a very long time, Mr. Speaker, places like the United States and the United Kingdom and France and all of these places, they were content to move around aspects of the production process to different places in the world. They moved their whole manufacturing over to Asia. They might do some aspect of the production process in Mexico. They know another aspect of the production process in India. They move things around and they saw a benefit as a result of that. They built super wealthy companies and nobody said a word about it until now. The wrong group of people started to lose their jobs. When African Americans in Detroit were losing their jobs because they moved the car industry offshore, nobody saw a problem with it. So now globalization is having, in some person's view, a negative impact on a certain segment of the population, and now you see the rise of the Trumps of the world and some of the other persons who have been a part of this anti-globalization rhetoric. And let me be clear, Mr. Speaker, I know that globalization has costs and benefits, but there are some countries who believe that they must always win in the competition. And if they start to lose in the competition, they change the rules. So this situation we've been subjected to is not fair. It has nothing to do with fairness. It has everything to do with power. I'll give you an example. United States imposed FATCA on the world, including imposing FATCA on the BVI, Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act. We all have to disclose. The OECD came with the common reporting standards, and the United States refused to sign on to it. The United States don't have to report to a soul. Everybody must report to them, but they're not reporting to anybody. Power. So we've been doing this song and dance with every single thing they come with in an attempt to preserve the industry here because we understand the importance of the industry to the BVI. Now they've come with beneficial ownership. They've confused privacy with secrecy. They want persons who are wealthy to disclose all their private and personal information. And even when we have systems in place to be able to report to the relevant, competent authorities, that's still not good enough for them. We have BOSS, Beneficial Ownership Secure Search System, which has allowed us to be able to report, I believe, in a matter of an hour or so, something like that. Some very short amount of time. I know it's way less than 24 hours. To be able to communicate beneficial ownership information to competent authorities in the United Kingdom or wherever else jurisdiction that makes a responsible request. And we praised the BOSS system. Minister for Transportation said it. unique in the world, to the point now where other jurisdictions want to use it. And, you know, I certainly congratulate those persons who have put it together. And now, in addition to the beneficial ownership now, which I should say has come on the heels of the worst disaster in the BVI's history, suffered from 2 Category 5 hurricanes plus a flood, had a disastrous impact on our society, and the United Kingdom follows that up with, well, guess what? We're going to destroy whatever's left of your economy. Your tourism economy has been decimated. Financial services industry is still going, as Honorable Leader of the Opposition stated, because of Virgin technology. But we want to get rid of that too. I can't bring myself to call the United Kingdom a mother country. So, we now have economic substance now. The European Union has decided that all the different companies who are tax resident in the BVI, and we have over 400,000 companies. I'm not quite sure how many are tax resident. This is part of what is going to be measured with this system that we're putting in place. And that they have to be conducting some relevant activity on our shores at a certain level of money. If you're below a certain threshold, you'll be exempted. I can't remember how much it is, whether it's 750 million or I can't remember. Right? But you have to be tax resident. You have to be conducting some relevant activity here at a certain level, economic level. If you fit that category, you have to have what is referred to as substance. You have to have some kind of physical presence on the ground, which really does not take into account the digital economy. It's almost like we're going backwards, because lots of things are happening digitally now, and this doesn't necessarily take that into account. They want to see physical buildings operating here of a business. You either have your headquarters here, or you're having your board meetings here, or you're doing some what is called relevant activity related to your business in the BVI. Now, that's a difficult task. And I'm sure that the purveyors of this requirement saw this as a death knell to the BVI. And this affects the BVI more than it would other jurisdictions because of the nature of the type of the nature of the business we do here. Being primarily an incorporation center. We incorporate companies here, and those same companies would go and transact business in other jurisdictions, whether they would make investments, they would have their accounts managed someplace else, so on and so forth. So it imposes some very serious requirements on us which are difficult to meet. And I'm not trying to scare anyone in the public, but I do not believe that we have fully grasped what is before us. We are looking at a complete shift in the business that we've been doing since 1984, is it? How many years ago is that? It was 30-something years ago, 35 years ago. We are at the precipice of a new reality in the BVI. And I don't think we fully grasped it as yet. So I unite with the sentiments expressed with the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, calling for unity. We need government and opposition to work together. We need, and that unity has to extend beyond the House of Assembly. We need to get our best minds together to decide for ourselves where are we going to go with the financial services industry and where are we going to go in other areas of our economy. And this is something we have to do yesterday. Because we should have actually passed this legislation before, I believe it might have been the 31st. We should have done this yesterday. We have to get together and we have to decide what's next for the BVI. Because the companies have to become compliant by what date is it? I think it might be by 2020. We have to become compliant by 2020 with the requirements. And blacklisting is not an option for us. In fact, I applaud the efforts of all of those who helped to keep us off the blacklist. You get blacklisted, no company in this jurisdiction, registered in this jurisdiction, would be able to do business with the European Union. That would have a disastrous impact. And that would result in a lot of these companies leaving. So we can't afford to be blacklisted, and to keep off the blacklist, things going to be changing here. So there's no easy solutions. We have to come up with a plan B, C, and D and put them to work right away. I have ideas. So I'm pushing agriculture, I'm pushing fisheries, pushing for us to have a cultural economy, sports, tourism, etc. But we have to put some resources behind these areas and some serious attention into these areas. And I also ask the public to be mindful that we won't be able to operate the same way we've been operating before. I would encourage persons out there to work as hard as you can to become much more independent of government. Stop relying on government if you can't buy. Let me don't go there.
Everything.
I keep saying, I'm keeping it real with you. I'm keeping it real. The reality is, we've been afraid to tell persons for some time. We have to do things differently. This economy is producing jobs. This economy is producing jobs. We don't have a problem with the production of jobs. Many of our persons are not in those jobs. And while we can blame our education system, we can blame this and that system, part of it is personal responsibility. That's a part of it. I see persons come here who are not skilled. They fool you to tell you that these persons are skilled. A lot of these persons learn on the job. They come with a will and a desire to become successful. Determination. And in the BVI, God bless us. I love my people. In some ways, we've become complacent. And every group of people from every other place will overtake us for that complacency. And some people want to chew me up for saying the truth. I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to tell you the truth. I don't know if I last 20 years. I don't know if I last 4 years. I'm going to tell you the truth. Take it the way you want to. Yeah. The truth will set you free. We cannot conduct business as usual here in the BVI. Upskill yourself. Whatever is your part, do your part well. I will try to do my part. But you do your part. Because in a little while, we won't have the same choices we have now. In a little while, it's really going to be sink or swim. When you see persons fleeing from their economies, the places where they live and call home, trying to survive, that's not for joke. And there was a time in our history where we had to, a lot of our ancestors had to leave looking in search of work. I would advise persons to take responsibility for your own well-being. Upskill yourself. Work hard. Make sure you give value. Give value to your employer. Let's take care of our community. Let's not stop thinking that government has to pay us to clean up our own garbage in our community. We have to operate differently. I'm sounding the alarm because persons do not understand what's coming. We have to get serious. I think I've said enough to make the blogs, Mr. Speaker. These amendments, last thing I'll say, Mr. Speaker, these amendments speak to, first of all, the act is called Beneficial Ownership Secure Source System. The requirements that we're looking at, not necessarily in economic substance, not necessarily beneficial ownership. But we've adjusted the same legislation to meet the economic substance reporting requirements. And we are making adjustments to the system itself, Beneficial Ownership Secure Source System itself, to be able to report on the economic substance requirements. And the wonderful thing about BOSS is it analyzes the algorithms so that you can analyze data very quickly. And it's one of a kind because of that type of analysis. So I would say that we are fortunate to have such a system to assist us, because to be able to process data from over 400,000 companies would be something that is truly beyond us, given the resources we have at our disposal. My colleague spoke about the International Tax Authority and the need to be able to beef that up, to be able to meet the requirements of the European Union's reporting. So we are fortunate to have this system. I congratulate and applaud all persons who have been involved in working on that particular system. The consultants, the lawyers who have worked on this piece of legislation to ensure that it meets the European Union standards. Hopefully, all goes smoothly, and companies will be able to, do the reporting that's necessary. Hopefully, passing this legislation will give a certain level of confidence to the industry that we are moving in the right direction, that we understand what we're doing. I'll reiterate the need for us to have a community-wide discussion about where we want to go when it comes to the value-added services that will be required, which I should say is, if you look at the McKinsey report, that's the direction that was being suggested anyway, that we have to be able to add value and do more than just incorporate companies. So let's sooner than later have this community-wide discussion about the way forward. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I thank the Minister for Education, Culture, Youth Affairs, Fisheries, and Agriculture, member for the 7th District, for his presentation, and I'm sure your colleagues have noted your passion. I now recognize the Minister for Natural Resources and Labor and Immigration and the member for the 9th District, the Honorable Vincent O. Whitley, for his contribution to the debate on the Beneficial Ownership Secure Search System Amendment 2 Act 2019.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't really plan to be as long as the previous speaker.
Was I long?
But I too have to right to support this Beneficial Ownership Secure Search System. Mr. Speaker, it seems like from the inception of this legislation, it was problematic. It came into force in 2017. That very year, very month, it saw its first amendment. This, Mr. Speaker, 2 years later, we are back here again amending this legislation. When the Premier spoke, I think it was the Premier the other day, he called it the golden calf, financial services. And the member for the 3rd also spoke passionately about this golden calf and how it was treated. I've heard reference made to it before, financial services, as the golden calf. So I took a little time to research what this golden calf metaphor was really all about. It happens that the golden calf came from a biblical story when Moses went up to Mount Sinai, I think it was, to receive the 10 Commandments. He was gone for 40 days and 40 nights. And the people he left behind grew restless and said he had abandoned them. They needed a God to save them. And so they built that golden calf and began to worship it. So I guess what the members were saying earlier is that we kind of lost our way somewhere along the line and put all our focus on the financial services. And the member for the third alluded to that we really didn't discuss it much. It was kept among our select few, so to speak. Whenever it came to the House, it was agreed on both sides. There was hardly any real debate about it. 3 readings in one sitting. Every single time. Now today, we are here questioning the wisdom of the golden calf. Mr. Speaker, I grew up in an era when there was no financial services. And then it came. And Mr. Speaker, the BVI got a very funny name. We used to be called a tax haven. We hide dirty money. We people from the developed countries who use here to do all kind of bad activities. Member said $1.3 trillion passing through. 1.5 trillion passing through. The question we have to ask ourselves, are we prepared to leave this stigma on the BVI for our children to inherit? Are we going to leave this for them to fight also? We're going for about 30 years now. And every indication shows that it will not change. We'll be here again in the next year or two amending this again, maybe this very year. Because the EU will always find something to change. They're not going after the people who are creating this, you know. It's not we coming here doing anything. It's their people, their accountants and their lawyers who are using our instrument here to do business. Transactions, there's no money here. They're transactions. We have to do something about the image of the BVI. I think it's unfair to future generations to have them inherit a tarnished name. In that same story with the golden calf, when Moses came down, I'm not sure if the premiers were Moses, but when he came down and he saw the golden calf, he was so upset. He took the golden calf and he crushed it into a powder. And he made the people drink it, put it in water, drink this. So you can remember the foolishness you had done. And to follow correct path. Keep your eyes on the prize. God brought you here. God's going to take you out. Not the golden calf. He mixed the dust from the golden calf in water, and he made them drink it. So, Mr. Speaker, we have to decide where we're taking this BVI. Are we going to continue with this fight, or are we going to diversify our economy to a point where we could almost ignore financial services? We have to diversify the economy. I agree with the Minister for the Third, for the kind of money that is made here from the companies that do business here. They charge the fees. They make the real money. They make the real money. And we must get more. I agree with the member. We must get more out of it. I'm not saying that we should increase the percentage of our budget. We need to increase our budget, but not necessarily through financial services. We are creative people. We build this place from nothing to where it is a very prosperous place. I look at the budgets over the last few years, and about every 10 years, it has increased by about $100 million. I predict that the next increase will not be $100 million. It's going to be about $500 million if we do the right things. We have a budget here. It's a huge recurrent part. Most of it goes in salaries. Very little money to actually help the people who put us here. So we have to make sure that we are making money to do things for the people. Yes, people are making salaries, and they're taking those salaries and they're keeping the economy moving. They're building buildings. They're buying stuff. We patch a road here and there. We cannot be stumbling, Mr. Speaker, into our future. Our future right now demands deliberate planning. We have to invest more in capacity building for our future. I said it, I think, yesterday. We had tourism. There was no group of guys who sat down around a table like this and said, tourism is good for the BVI. Tourism kind of happened to us. And we went along with it. It wasn't planned by us. Financial services came along. Also, it wasn't really planned by us. I think it's time we sit down as elected representatives and plan where we want this country to go and develop the capacity among our people to take us there. This bar system that we have amending now, like I said before, we're going to always be doing this. We have to make sure we are taking care of this country by building capacity, deliberate planning, and building capacity. I remember one time a gentleman came to me, a wise gentleman, now deceased, and he asked me if I ever look at the circus. I say, yeah. You see those guys, those lions there, making them jump through the hoops? The guys open the lion mouth, put his head in, and take his head out. And he asked me if I think that gentleman could go anywhere in Africa, the jungle, and put his head in a lion's mouth there. I said, well, clearly not. He asked me why not. He told me the lion in the jungle is trained by his own. The lion in the circus trained by others, humans. So we have to train our own people. So we could take care of this country the way it needs to go. So when we come in the house with a budget, the people who send us here can clearly get the benefit of having us here. We should be doing things to move this country forward. Not every single time the EU see us moving, they change the goalposts, and we got to jump in again. Oh, come in here. We got to amend this. Oh, it's substance. Oh, it's this. And it costs the territory money every single time. This bar system costs millions of dollars. This is the money we could have used to do a lot of other things. Every time the EU sees something happening, and it's a trick of developed countries, people or members in developed countries. It's not everybody. There are good people everywhere. But I've seen a pattern. If you look through history, there are some people in this world who believe they alone should control everything. And they alone should have everything. And if they can't control it, they leave you with it, But guess what? They devalue it, so it's no use to you. If you look at the history of sugar, sugar built the whole of Europe. We still have sugar here. They can't build nothing. Because it have no value now, like before. We used to live here, be islanders, go Santo Domingo, Cuba, Costa Rica, cut sugar cane, help build BVI. Then they bring in sugar beet. Sugar cane, couldn't control it. After a while, I guess I get independent. They invent and subsidize sugar beet. Your sugar cane came to absolutely nothing because they could no longer control it. At one time, Trinidad was one of the richest countries in the world. They were one of the third richest because they had oil. And when they were done, Trinidad's struggling now because the bed of oil has gone to nothing. You can't control it, less devalued. So we are amending this now because of substance. Yeah, we're going to get it fixed. We're going to get it amended. But give it a few months. We're right back here again with some other thing. I guarantee you that. You'll be right back here again with something else. We have to, everybody's saying, well, we had debating this thing so long. I think it's on a record, 3 days in the House. Because we face blacklisting. And blacklisting is a very, very serious thing. It has serious consequences for our country. The BVI haven't survived Hurricanes Irma and Maria and are in recovery. If, for some reason, this thing isn't passed and we are blacklisted, I can't see us recovering. Because being blacklisted, number one, as a member said for the 7th, is tied to EU funding. So automatically, your funding cut off if you had any ideas of getting funding from the EU. Secondly, in a very little known fact, any money you plan to borrow, once you're blacklisted, your rates go up 300% automatically. So whereas you could borrow for maybe 4%, you're on the blacklist, you got 12%. Can't survive. Unsustainable. So, Mr. Speaker, we have to decide if you're going to be kicking this can down the road, if you're going to continue worshiping this golden calf, or if you're going to do what we have to do and diversify this economy to where we're not so dependent on it. Mr. Speaker, the people who sent us here have great faith that this new government is going to turn this country around. What I find even more interesting is that once the opposition are depending on us to turn this country around. And I think that's admirable. I listened to the member for the Tower speak yesterday. Whenever he speaks, him or the member for the 8th, I listen to this gentleman very carefully, a very intelligent gentleman. And a type of experienced gentleman. Barely passed a rookie. And the member for the 2nd. They've seen some stuff. They've been here before. That's why I listened very passionately and I really appreciate the member for the 3rd's contribution. He had me thinking all night last night about what he said. He had a pack, because he understands, he'd been there. And Mr. Speaker, I hope, well, I don't think I'll be a career politician. I wouldn't be here like in 20 years. But should I be here 20 years, I can't look back and say, I have achieved nothing. We shouldn't be allowed to say that. 20 years in the House and you're going to say, we've achieved nothing? No, no, Mr. Speaker. So we have to make those tough choices, though they may be unpopular. We must, every term, be able to have a checklist and say, we have achieved X, Y, Z, and real things. That's right. Real things. Every single term. We must be able to look back and say, this was done, that was done. So 20 years from now, you're supposed to be able to look back and say, these 4 things were done. I did one each term. One significant thing each term.
And you can't find none?
About members say they can't find none. So often hit term after term after term and saying they can't find nothing they achieve. And I think, no, Mr. Speaker, I find it unacceptable. It's a disservice to the people of this territory to come to the House and say you have achieved nothing or little was achieved. I know things are difficult, but we have to get creative. We have to get creative, Mr. Speaker. The world is getting more complex. It's not getting any less complex. We have to put our collective minds and brains together and take this BVI in the direction. We have to make those tough, those controversial decisions. So 20 years from now, we could look back and say, well, I was there, and this was done. These things were done during my era. I remember when Saddam Hussein was in power, he used to like to build. But he did one thing that I admire. Whatever he built, every single brick had on built in the age of Saddam. Nobody wasn't going to say he ain't built nothing. He put his stamp on every single thing he did to make sure that posterity wouldn't forget that he was alive. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I want to encourage all the members here to think long and hard about why we're here in this House and the difference. The things we do in this House should touch the lives of our constituents. They should feel the difference. People saying, years I ain't got no water in the district. Oh, this road ain't fixed in years. Sewage here for years. Mr. Speaker, no. We cannot continue to live like this. Let's make those those controversial decisions and move this country. Just be more prudent with our funding. Let's be prudent with our funding. I saw a lady just a few days ago who told me, you know, issue. She told me, Mr. Minister, this is a 20-year problem. I started levity or something. So I'm like, what? He said, yes, for 20 years, I am going through this here. I showed it to the Premier yesterday. He said, 20 years. I said, I'll try my best, but it can't be 20 months. People have to be a little patient now. I can't solve a 20-year problem in 20 months. It may take me 4 years. But there are long-standing problems in this country that we have to make sure that we take care of them. And I support legislation because at this point in time we have no choice. But I don't want to feel like we are beholden to the EU. That whenever they say jump, we ask how high and start finding ladders and start finding things and start jumping up like crazy people. We need to move beyond. And I agree with the Minister for the Tour. Let's move beyond this. So 20 years from now, it will be a different story in the House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I thank the Minister for Natural Resources, Labour and Immigration and Member for the Ninth for his contribution. And I acknowledge the presence of our Leader of Government Business who have joined us. We continue the debate with the Minister for Health and Social Development and Territorial Member, the Honourable Carvin Malone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to join in the debate before us. There are two parts to this, because somehow we got lost. Between yesterday and today, we got lost. Came back on track, out again, in again. The Beneficial Ownership Secure Search System Act came into effect on 30th June. I did the research also, 2017, and this is where the mover of the bill, the Premier, stated, the BOSS Act facilitates the effective storage and retrieval of beneficial ownership information. Mr. Speaker, can I be allowed to refer to my notes on time?
Granted.
The BOSS Act facilitates the effective storage and retrieval of beneficial ownership information for all BVI companies and legal entities using the Beneficial Ownership Secure Search System. The BVI government signed an exchange of notes agreement with the UK government in April of 2016. The Beneficial Ownership Secure Search System is built to ensure that the BVI can effectively and efficiently exchange that information in relation to the exchange of notes. The beneficial ownership information in the system will also be available to other authorities in the BVI to ensure that they are able to meet international obligations. In the objects and reasons, because we may not get back to this again, Clause 4 would amend Section 10 of the Principal Act by inserting a requirement that a legal and corporate entity state whether or not it is carrying on a relevant activity. It also enables an entity to claim exemption from the economic substance requirements by reason of being tax resident in another jurisdiction without having to state whether or not it carries on a relevant activity. It inserts a requirement that a legal and corporate entity state the amount of its expenditure on a relevant activity. Finally, it ensures that a legal and corporate entity which carries on holding businesses only has to supply the limited information relevant to the reduced economic substance requirement for such a business. I'll read one more. Clause 6 would amend the Schedule 4 in the Principal Act by expanding the scope of the disclosure required to overseas tax authorities where a legal and corporate entity claims to be resident in another jurisdiction and is beneficial or legal ownership or resident in an EU member state. I read that just to bring us back into context as the two speakers today have stated. Why are we here? We're here to look at this and to see, as it relates to this act, the amendments that we have. Where would it help us? Why do we need to pass this? It makes mention of owners are resident in an EU member state. The original also states that it is information agreement signed with the United Kingdom. We're in the middle of a divorce of the United Kingdom and the same EU. So what effect this would have come November 1st is still going to be quite amazing to see, well, exactly where we go with this. Because we also have, at the end of this, and we want to move post haste to get the beneficial ownership, economic substance, we want to get to this. I had waited, and I depended on the members opposite to basically give me their input so that when I get up, I can just say, well, I support what's coming from the side opposite. But part two of this now is diverted. Nothing in terms of why we are here with this specific bill. We began to be schooled on introduction of what the member from the 7th call. Well, I must first say this. When I started my statement at the beginning, some 72 hours ago, when I started my statement in the first sitting, in the first day of this three-day session, I caused to be read into the record a April 8th. I think it was 1961 article, and reference again was made to it by the member for the 7th district, because I would be referring to it from time to time. It was pertinent then as it is now. And when I made my statement, I think I followed the advice given by the member from the 3rd, because he said, well, a number of the stuff you're going into now is really meant for any or private member business. Was that the other business? For other business. So I thought that to be good and solid advice. Saved. So when I heard where his contribution had pivoted to, when it came to BOSS, I said, well, I'm going to have to bring back up my DNA lab, because we wanted to make sure it was the same basis of advice that I was given. The members who spoke today spoke of some of the items that we were schooled on in the document that he caused to be read into the records of the House. This is why the member for the 7th made reference to it. And now seeking explanation, wanted him to explain which part of a bogus report is wrong. But let's go deeper into not that report, but into what basically some of the inferences that were made. Because the member also stated And, disappointed too in the member from the 8th, because we want to know, because I came in and I love to read about the activities of the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. In fact, some of my members say, well, you keep repeating the same thing. And there's always a reason why I repeat stuff. The only thing I would differ from the member for the 9th on is that he said that tourism was not planned. It happened to us. I beg to differ, because I don't want to take away one moment glory from the architects of they called it, in terms of the taxes and reliefs given, they went all over the world to make sure that the Rockefellers and the other persons come here. They give concessions for land. They wanted to protect the land, so then what they did was make sure that non-belongers land holding licenses were also effective. So a number of things happened as a result. We were pivoting away from agriculture and fishing, so he's happy to know that the minister responsible will want to pivot back in an enhanced way, because he have some new initiatives which he wants to introduce. So while members might take it lightly what he's saying, I'm looking forward, because I have to hold him back on some of them. So this is very important for us to know. When we look in terms of the 1980s, because I talk about this, so then when any member comes with this, they have to come a little bit more substantive than telling me that it just happened to us. We had a double taxation treaty with the United States. When they took that away, we had to go into the IBC. And the grandfather of it, Cyril B. Rumney, they went into this deep, and I think Mr. Lionel Barker and the others, late Lionel Barker and the others went into this. So it was a planned approach. We did not invent the Panama affair, so it got boosted right away. So the fact is that we're going to do it. I spoke of being able to come into ourselves and make sure that the other economic pillar, of which the Premier is steadily talking about, because you have other initiatives that we have to go into in order so that we can then look. We pivoted from agriculture and fishing into tourism. We pivoted, we added, because we did not go away, because tourism is our mainstay. Sailing, BVI, the other 18-hole sport. So we have to make sure that we continue to boost, enhance, get our tourism product up, get our people up in order to do this, right? So when we come and we talk, and we have to be proud of the advances that our people have made per capita, because when I go to these other places, we have developments in certain lands, and whether it is, I'll just say certain lands, because I don't want to call names. But you have a number of Canadian investors come, and big developments. The local person feel as if there's nothing for which they have contributed. You have Chinese investment come. They go to certain places. They took over airports and roads and all kind of facilities. The local person feels as if they have nothing of which they are invested in. Number of particularly other areas. In the BVI, we may not have done it all the way that it should. But the reasons why a number of persons moved back to the shore or moved back home, we looked in terms of the fourth generation and we said we're going to encourage them back here. We might not have the best medical facility in the world, but we have one that we can be proud of. We may not have all of the particular commercial buildings and so forth, but when I look at the investments made by Maria's and the Well, all the other names. I would not start calling names. Or else I'll have to call my own. But at the end of the day, when you look at all of the investments made, we have to find ways in which we can secure the investments made. We can look in terms of how we further develop. Because unlike where the particular writer, we are looking at full cocks going and walking through stuff. Yes, I even see some dogs running in the road and so forth. Some cows running. And, you know, and all of this. And a puppy never been to Germany is a German Shepherd. 25 generations later. But at the end of the day, is this an indictment on us? No. Look also at what we spoke of. We spoke of what have we done with our particular monies, right? Mr. Speaker, if it was my very first choice, I would not have run even in the 2019 elections, but it pivoted that way because of certain circumstances. But this country needs a lot of help to get us from the path that we were headed to where we need to be. We have signed on April 23rd some specific guidelines that the members opposite were 4/5. 2012, 4/5 involved in. Excuse me? 3/5. 4/5. Yeah, because you can't be half pregnant, Mr. Speaker. So 4/5 involved. Because we talk about the silence. We have a situation where we don't have to come back to where we were because we have obligations that were signed that, you know, we have to live with. We have some specific conditions that were placed on this country in order to secure the guarantees needed to get us out of the effects of a storm that devastated us in 2017. Almost by no choice, because the persons who were, in my view, empowered to make sure that we did not get here, put us here. So when we come and we talk about what it is that we should have done, could have done, would have done, then I have to go for my DNA lab. Because I want to take lessons. I want to take lessons, but I want to be schooled by folks who are going to be consistent in taking us from the platform where we are to correct that where we've been and not to incite folks about who might be short-sighted and who long-sighted and who all of this. Because I have failed to, quote-unquote, lay blame on others and past administrations, then folks, will end up, because when I finally get the baton properly, because everyone's trying to hand off this baton quick. When I get the baton properly, I will take it. I will take it. But everybody wants to hand off their baton quick and then come here asking questions as if it's another person. DNA. We have to get this thing right. So this bar system, that of which we were seeking to look to put, which should have been a very small, short debate, turned into a lesson as to how we should have better prepared ourselves, how we should have gone and do this, and we gone and do that, and so forth. So I lend support to this. I lend support.
Can we take a short recess, emergency recess? Please be seated. The House resume its sitting. I apologize to the Minister for Health for the brief interruption. Minister, continue.
Mr. Speaker, this is item what, number 10? Is item number 10, so this is the one. So I'm going to soon just, since I've reached the proper lane, I'm going to soon pass this baton to the mover of the bill legally, so that we can then close this, and then I can go back in the room and sit for a while. But we will. So when we come to this, because the leader of the opposition has now returned, thank you very much for returning. So when we and two other members, so when we come to look at completing the debate on this Beneficial Ownership Secure Search System Amendment number 2, Act 2019, we have to be mindful and consistent so that we spend no more money increasing labs and lab equipment. So, Mr. Speaker, at my age, when you stop me like that, then I can just say it's difficult to get the same speed where you were. So I rest my case.
Thank you, Minister for Health and Social Development. Again, my humble apologies for the emergency interruption. Members, I think we need to maintain our House decorum, and I apologize that we would not be taking a frequent break because there's no incentive in the back. Nevertheless, the floor is still open. Any other member wish to make a contribution to the bill before the House? I recognize the member for the 2nd District, the Honorable Melvin M. Turnbull.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the speaker before me, the Minister for Health and Social Development, there ought to be something for that. As the Minister of Health, I think he should find something for that. In this age that we're in. Prayers. Faith without works is dead, Mr. Speaker. And we just came from hearing another reference to why Andrew is here down in West End. So I know he will bring that up soon. But, Mr. Speaker, the bill before us, and there seems to be a lot of contention and misunderstanding of why the bill is being debated in the way it is. In fact, it is an amendment. But I hope and I crave the indulgence of honorable members as well as the general public to understand the importance of what has been said. Whether you agree with it or not, I think the inference to how this bill came about, the historical background as to the game that has been played with the industry that has helped the BVI tremendously to become who we are. it can't be taken lightly. I know it is only an amendment, but the historical context of the bill, no matter who passed it, who brought it, when it came about, I think is important, especially for the government members to understand and do the research and even read the substantial bill to understand what was happening and why this bill came about. Because, Mr. Speaker, back in, I think it was 2015, then again in 2016, both years, the then Premier allowed me or invited me to come to the joint ministerial conference in the UK with him. But specifically the 2016 meeting that we attended, where the leaders of the overseas territories were given an opportunity to present their cases before the ministers of parliament from the UK, is where I witnessed the challenges that we are up against. The member for the minister, for Education and Culture, Youth Affairs, Fisheries and Agriculture, stated that he did not agree with the author, to which the member for the third read his Bloomberg report and referenced it. And then took a turn, Mr. Speaker, to highlight his displeasure with the way that we are treated by the UK, which to me only strengthened the member for the third's point that he was reading right out of that same Bloomberg report. The financial services sector, Mr. Speaker, is 30 plus years. And those that helped to birth this industry must be commended. Those that helped to drive this industry must be commended. Those that continue to keep this industry alive must be commended. But there are disparities, Mr. Speaker, that we need to pay attention to. So the first reference is to draw the numbers, just the numbers, from what the honorable member from the third raised. $1.5 trillion industry that passes through our shores via the systems, via the companies that we house here. And out of that, we get just about $170+ million. If you do the math, something is wrong. Because if you look at the risk associated with doing business, the risk is here in the BVI. The stains, the blames, the blacklisting, the different areas, the different requirements, the different schisms and systems that they ask and require for us to put in place cost us money and the labor. When you also look at the fact that in that 2016 meeting, I remember sitting with then representative in the UK, Mr. Benito Whitley, and I think it was Broderick Penn and some others with the then Premier. And I asked one question, and I asked, out of the things that are being required of the BVI, out of the 10 things, I said this in the last sitting very early, I got some pushback on it, but I understood what I was saying. Out of the 10 things that they were requiring for us to do, the BVI financial services industry had checked 7 out of the 10 boxes. When compared to some of the other countries, including the United Kingdom, hadn't even checked 4. So while we look and appreciate what the industry has done for us for some 30 years, the question is it now enough? And I said this before, we are in this territory of the Virgin Islands, operated on visions cast some 30 years ago. We are managing visions that were cast. That's not to put down any of our former leaders, premiers, chief ministers. That's not to do any of that. But we are managing something. The financial services industry is 30 years. Everything in life, if you understand business, it operates like a mountain. It goes up and it goes down, and it peaks and it starts to decline. And if we understand and bring it into context, and for some strange reason, it always comes back now to where we are historically, being emancipated from our slavery, Mr. Speaker. There is something, the BVI was left to be a board sanctuary. Yes, some may say that don't have nothing to do with the bill, we just amended it. No, it has everything to do with it. It has everything to do with it from the standpoint of we are not supposed to have what we have. So while the Minister of Education and Culture would disagree, with some of the points raised from that report, the fact of the matter is, the report was written, it's published, and people see it. They believe it. And if we are honest with ourselves, if you look around and not take it personally, for an industry that's $1.5 trillion, the BVI don't look like Cayman, they don't look like Bermuda, they don't look like any of the other countries. So we have been facilitating and continue to facilitate based on what exists. Ted. Mr. Speaker, my background in finance and money management, investing, and all the other insurance and things allowed me to see something. So I'm going to give, for us to understand the numbers, for us to understand more of the disparities. And the Honorable Smith and Honorable Penn, who have served, I think Honorable Smith has been in this industry over 20 plus years, 30 years, and Honorable Penn has been in the Financial Services Commission for some 15 years. Mr. Speaker, our local lawyers, and I'm just going to stay up at the management position, our local lawyers, back in when I was managing the financial services firm and doing pensions and investments for them, our local lawyers had an average salary between $100,000 and $160,000 per year. Those that came from overseas were between $250,000 and $450,000 a year. And our people were training them on the industry. when you go to the managers of some of these firms, Mr. Speaker, and you look at what our people earn compared to what some of the other persons earn, that's where the disparities are. So the point that the honorable member for the third raised and reiterated by the leader of the opposition is that we have to do something to bridge the gap. It was okay. It helped us to get where we got. It's still helping us in a major way, but we have to do something now to bring it back to where we own it, while still fighting the pressures that come from outside. Because one of the things I don't understand, Mr. Speaker, when I came home in 2005, and I encouraged young people, once you graduate in high school in this territory and you're going to college, I encourage every young person that I could touch. Do me a favor if you can afford it, if the opportunity is presented, get off this rock. Get off this BVI rock and get some exposure and experience so you that can understand. Because when my parents came up, this is what I was told. You go to school, you go to work, and then you work in a job and you be comfortable and you provide for your family. Nothing is wrong with that. Nothing is wrong with that. But when our children and our young people graduate from high school, they go into these trust companies and they become the secretaries, front desk, answering the phone, receptionists. And then they start to do incorporations, and then they might move up the latter some 15 or 20 years down the road. The problem is nobody is asking for the bigger piece of the pie. Yes, there are a few of us in positions. Remember for the Minister of Health keep talking about this baton. And I drew him a reference. And I'm going to draw it to him, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, man. We're talking now. Not for you specifically, but I'm drawing a reference. Mr. Speaker, I told a member for the Minister for Health, if we go back to boy days, and he had a girlfriend. No, I had a girlfriend. And she was my girlfriend. And he'd take my girlfriend from me. Who girlfriend is it? Ain't he girlfriend? Whether I'm 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months on the road, is he girlfriend? I can't claim as my girlfriend. He don't take her. The point I'm making is not about casting blame. We all have our responsibility and points to play. But when it comes to these things, we have to ensure that we are fighting for our people. We're not earning enough, Mr. Speaker. Look at the contributions that are made back. Yes, the fees are there. Yes, we have done over the years increased fees and helped to increase the revenues earned from the financial services sector. But on top of all the regulations, on top of all the stipulations, on top of every time the premier, whether this one or the last one or the one to come, is trying to do things to cast a vision to lead this country. There are those forces out there, Mr. Speaker, that tried and will continue to try to destroy what we have because it's too good. The hospital was too good. The houses are too good. The cars are too good. And it is time, Mr. Speaker, we as elected officials, we as members of this House of Assembly, educators, professionals all through this BVI community, educate our people to give them, Mr. Speaker, the confidence that they deserve more, to ask for more, to demand more. So yes, and I had a problem with the name of the system. And the records will show. Honorable Christopher and myself, rest our soul. Anytime you name something boss over here, you're going to be the boss. We had a problem with the acronym boss, because that's exactly what it is. So the Honorable Minister for Immigration and Labor is correct. They're going to keep coming. The goalpost is going to shift. But we have to start to prepare to move from always on the defensive to the offensive. That's how we got to where we are. When the financial services industry started, based on my research, it wasn't expected to be nothing. And when we start to gain money from it, we started to say, wow. And yes, we may have held on to this one singular industry for too long. But here's the thing, it's still ours. We cannot allow the UK, the EU, or any other outside forces to keep determining and dictating to us. And nobody has said so far this whole economic substance, based on when that conversation came up. I understood, and somebody would have to correct me, but this is what I understood before I left the then government, that we were talking about bringing in some 1,000 people, 500 accountants and 500 lawyers. Nobody's talking about that. And they all have to come from outside the BVI. So we're saying we need it, we're saying we want to protect it, but tell the people what it means. What is that going to mean for the social and economic well-being of this territory? What, if it's changed, then let me know it's changed. But that's what I understood. But we're not speaking about it. We have a job to educate the public, let the public know what these things are, how it's going to affect our livelihood. Sometimes you could hold something and you tell you squeeze the very life out of it. It's still in your head, isn't it? But it's dead. Mr. Speaker, if you will allow me, I want to share something.
Approved.
I like the speaker. I think he's ready. The speaker is just a few bullet points from a presentation that was made back in 2001 from Professor Sir Hilary Beckles. And he spoke about justice at Oxford University. In 2001, 4 points, Mr. Speaker. This is what he said. In Britain's 10 arguments, I'm just taking the first 4. Slavery was no crime. We legalized it. Number 2, colonialism is over. Take responsibility for yourself. 3, racism is passé. You have a black majority government. 4, history is irrelevant. Stop whining and think of the future. Mr. Speaker, the young people say you got to stay woke. I read yesterday while we were here a very powerful point by one of our members, and I hope that she will do what she needs to do to put it in that light. Mr. Speaker, the things that continue to happen to us, they're not new. The attacks that continue to come our way, they're not new. Anything that you can't control, you'll try to kill. So yes, we are in the House of Assembly. There's an opposition and there's a government. And we are expected to be in there fighting like we ain't got no sense. But we will oppose when it's necessary. But for areas, each one of us, here's the key. Each one of us were elected to this House of Assembly. Not to the opposition, not to the government. To represent the best interests of this Virgin Islands. So as it relates to matters of the direction and the well-being of this country, the future of this country, to shape it for generations, whether it does with the economy, the social welfare, the education, anything, Mr. Speaker, we all have a role to play. And we don't always have to agree. But our responsibility is to the people of this country. For nothing else. Yes, we're going to quarrel. Yes, we're going to argue. But that's what democracy is about. It don't mean I against Honorable Minister for Transportation or Honorable Minister for Health. It don't mean I against you personally. I just have a different view. But at the end of the day, we are sent here to do what's in the best interest of this country. And Premier, I challenge you a lot. I'll give you another one now. Because I know for a fact there's some pressures that are going to continue to come your way. But I ask you, Premier, Honorable Premier, for the things that are bigger than you, Andrew Foy, as Premier, and deals with the overall well-being of this country, don't do like others before you and keep it to yourself. Don't let us have to fight when we don't even know what we're fighting for. Knowledge is power. And it's easier to destroy a nation that stands divided than one that stands united. Mr. Speaker, I still got a problem with the name. They call it being petty. I still got a problem with the name. But I understand that this is just another requirement. And I think the people of the Virgin Islands must note that the BVI has always been leading the charge in terms of being compliant with what is required. My difficulty, Mr. Speaker, to go back to a point that the Honorable Fraser made in his contribution, we have allowed the industry to merge our businesses, local businesses, offshore businesses. Business is business. Requirements for the shop right across the street that are so shop is the same as those for the big companies. Mr. Speaker, yesterday I spoke about preserving our heritage, protecting our legacy, and promoting our culture. In everything them say we got to do, mean we got to do it. Because I think if the public staff to understand some of the requirements that they would have for the little mom and pop shops, even some of the bigger ones, like the One Mats and those bigger companies and Honorable Wheatley's companies, those bigger companies. But seriously, even if the requirements of what they need to have in place is shared, our people, Mr. Speaker, will become scared, senseless. So we have to ensure, Honorable Premier, we have to ensure that we pull back some of these legislation, review them, and see, and force the legal minds and those in the Financial Services Commission to help us to find a way to continue to protect our people and businesses. Those before us fought so that the KFC and the McDonald's won't come to shut down people like Scatos and the rest. And Nito. Stop it now. And all the rest of them. They fought for it, Mr. Speaker, for a reason. The fees that are required to do business. There's no small business and regular business. It's all business. The Micro Business Act that we passed, the more we probe into that, you realize our people still fall into the same category. There's certain things that's not there. You will tell a lady that runs a candy shop or a soup shop that she owns $2,000 or $3,000 a month, and at the end, annually she got paid $5,000. Mr. Speaker, we have to take control again. We can't just be satisfied with what exists in the financial services. What we get, yes, we're grateful for it, but there has to be more that we demand for our people. If you want to blame us for being poor stewards, do that in some areas. But we have to take control. We have this opportunity to again reshape and rebuild this country, Mr. Speaker. This is about our country. Mr. Speaker, I never took it lightly from 2015, and I still don't take it lightly every day that I wake up. Having this opportunity to be the representative of the 2nd District, but more importantly, be a representative in the highest body for this territory that helped to shape me, to make me who I am this far. This is a huge responsibility. The politics back and forth and all the fanfare back, that's fine. But the duty that we have, I think, should surpass all of that. All the foolishness that we go through is just that, foolishness. But matters that come before us. Because as much as we skate over losing 10% of revenues from financial, matter of fact, if we lose 5%, is a problem. We skate over because we're getting by, but they're not going to stop coming. I remember a past member stand up in this house and he said, they're going to keep coming. I don't care what you do, they're going to keep coming, and they're going to keep coming, and they're going to keep coming. We have to, Mr. Speaker, put our minds together, put our heads together, while diversifying the industries and economy. Ensure that more is given, more is requested, more is demanded from this industry, who we have been the leaders for some 30 plus years. You know, when you own something and you lead something, you're supposed to be the boss of it, not it be the boss of you. I use the reference differently, so you are listening. Let me say it again. When you own something, you're supposed to be the boss. Not that something they taken to you what's supposed to happen and not happen. So, Mr. Speaker, while I support the amendments, understanding the urgency and understanding all of what is behind it, hopefully this too will be an opportunity for us to educate the public further so that they can join in with us and not just take advice from a select few, but find ways that we can continue to strengthen this industry, build this country, and develop it for future generations. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
I thank the member for the 2nd District for his contributions. Is there any other member willing to speak? Hearing none, I call on the sponsor of the bill, the Premier Leader of Government Business, to wrap up.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After now nearly 2 days, I can call this Lashing Dog had an album named At Last. Mr. Speaker, I sat and listened to most of the debate because some of it, as you know, started this afternoon while I was still out for the opening, the official reopening of the temporary facility at the West End Jetty. And I actually was stopping back to get to welcome the first ferry that was going. So the 2 other members, they left and they come up. But Mr. Speaker, I stayed there, and I must tell the Honorable House there, I stayed there for quite a while with the people of the 1st District before I had reached back up here. Because, yes, I'm the Premier, and this debate was going on. But whenever I go in the plane to travel, whether personal or for the country, and I see the stewardess or the flight attendant, as they call them now, they always say when they're done with the seat belts and show you how to use them, they go to the oxygen mask and they say, should the plane lose oxygen and the mask comes down, secure yourself first and then tend to others. So it was difficult to leave the 1st District there because the mask came down and I had to put it on down there. But now I'm here, Mr. Speaker, so that I apologize that I missed 1 or 2 parts of the debate. Well, Mr. Speaker, as I listened to it, I heard all the reasons why the bill, the substantial part of the bill, was not debated. And it sounded good. But, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to put a percentage. 70% of the debate ain't touched the bill yet. They sound good. We could do these things on our other business. Because it sounds good. And now I am in a quandary because some things got said that if you leave them alone, when you go to hear the radio in the morning, you'll hear that alone come across, and the people will say, that one suck it to the government. Because we have some experienced politicians in here, Mr. Speaker. So they know what to say. So when that soundbite come out by itself, independent of everybody else and what was happening, it sounds good. It sounds good. But it was not capturing what happened in the bill, in the proposed amendment. Mr. Speaker, when I did the objects and reason, I stated about all what's happening with beneficial ownership, and all we're doing here, Mr. Speaker, is to make sure that we make some amendments in the legislation that has that engine that allows for when the international world, no matter who they are, calls for information on tax and the bar system has to do it, it allows now for the scope of what all the bar system can do to get that information back in a timely manner in a matter of an hour or two, to get it back to whoever is requesting in almost real time. Because the demands now are quite complex and diverse. But the past legislation now is basically not allowing for this. The past legislation needed to expand to allow for some of the information that's needed. So you couldn't just go and do certain things with the bar system without passing the legislation. And if you don't get them done and any country calls for tax information and you cannot produce it within the time that you're stating, then you're allowing yourself to fall towards the blacklist. In layman's terms, that's all it is. So that's why the bill is not too big. It's just a matter of making some adjustments to allow for that to happen. And this bill, in economic substance, contrary, does not mean 500,000 lawyers coming. That's not directly attached to economic substance, 500 lawyers or whatever coming, Mr. Speaker. So it really wasn't much to say on this bill because it was a very simple amendment. But, Mr. Speaker, when I listen to what is being said, especially when I was outside of the House listening, anyone that's listening that don't understand what's happening will think that this government is in limbo and don't have a plan. And I wonder if it wasn't a deceptive way to do it. We only have for 5 months. Let me explain to you what I mean, Mr. Speaker. These amendments, Mr. Speaker, are not being done just by us. I have traveled the entire Caribbean, done all the OTs, done, and every one of them are complaining about the same thing. All of them are complaining, and the last meeting I went to was CARICOM. And in CARICOM, they are so annoyed in terms of, we just are associate members, so this little small fry in there was sitting down listening. They were actually coming together to hire a lawyer to go fight all those big boys, that the EU and all of them, to see if they can get them to operate differently, because what they're asking for is difficult for their territories to survive. It's not us alone. If you look at it in here alone, it'll look like, well, it's the BVI alone. Every single territory involved in this industry, in terms of the smaller states, are crying out. Why? Yes, we're making a lot of money from the industry. All the states are involved, all the small states, small island states. But what is the problem? Then that same money that you're making, you have to go and put it into staff. Look at the International Tax Authority, ITA. Yes, we make some money, but this year in the budget we had to go, in order to stay current with all the demands from the EU, the OECD, and all of them, we now had to take and put huge sums of money to allow them now, when this legislation is passed, because of the demand, to have to hire about 32 to 35 persons instantly. And not only that we had to hire them, it was part of the demand in order to have the office staff to a certain ratio. And Mr. Speaker, I heard some prime ministers and premiers in OECS and CARICOM saying that these pressures that they're putting on their territories have them inside passing, amending legislation all up to Christmas Eve. And that's the same thing we're doing, because every time you feel that you have whatever the EU, OECD, or any one of them want, don't pack, they shift again. And you have to put in more resources. So if you make $100, sometimes you have to put in nearly 85 out of the $100 to go protect the industry again. So this is nothing new to the BVI. So we need to, when we're speaking to the people, we need to tell them the whole picture. It's not the BVI alone here trying to
pass these legislation. It's the whole entire place that's involved, especially small island states. And this needs to be told to the public. And on top of that, Mr. Speaker, I need to point out a few things. That when we compare, look at other territories, other countries, what they have done with their money, how we know they do it with the financial services money. You see, if you don't travel, if you don't read, if you don't research, you will believe anything you hear. I always tell people research. Don't take my word or nobody who speaks to you the word just like so. Go back and research it. Okay, I have my story, your story, and the truth. Research it. Because if you don't research, Mr. Speaker, you could be fooled easily. You could be told if you're in church, turn to Psalm 151 and have the pastor quoting it and sounding good. The problem is, Mr. Speaker, there is no Psalm 151. Mr. Speaker, I say that because when we say look at the other territories or countries and see what they have done with their money, I drove through different paths because I've been traveling for the country and renewing ties, and I was impressed with certain places I went. And I said, wow, you know, this place really looks good. Till when I get going, I realize now, when I get to speak with some of the grassroots people in the place, I realize that there's a divide between the grassroots and what's happening. And I would ask them, well, what happened? And then go and research it officially. Some of those territories allow persons who could buy the BVI 50 times over to end up owning half of their country. And some of them fix up those areas, turn over some to the government, and still own them. So when you drive in those areas, they look good. So they say, be careful making your eye long, old people used to say. Because all that glitters is not gold. I'm proud of the BVI. I'm not saying that we don't have things to fix. We have plenty of things to fix. We meet a lot of them to fix. And we're told we meet a lot of money, but we meet a lot of problems. Problems, some of them were lingering for a while. Some of them Omar brought on. A lot of them. And what we have to do moving forward, I agree with everybody with financial services and all the other industries, is spend the money wisely. All of a sudden, Mr. Speaker, everybody forgetting how come we can't reach to the old people with more money? How come we can't reach to the schools with more money? And they have a lot of money. That's all you're hearing. Well, sometimes poor decisions allow these things. Sometimes poor management allow these things. Mr. Speaker, the reason that you even have to contemplate a loan right now is the lot of money you have isn't enough to fix all the problems. To finish fix the police stations, to finish fix the customs, to fix the incinerator and the problem down Parkwood Pond, to fix some of the schools, Mr. Speaker, to fix the airport, to fix some of our ports, and the list could go on. When you match what we have to fix that we met, the money would be like butter against the sun. So we need to tell the people that, and we have a lot of deals that we have to be paying out all the time. We have a lot of lawsuits that we have to look for the money for. There's one lawsuit that's up to $35 million and climbing. There's another one for a water company up to $22 million and climbing. Those are the figures we know thus far that I bring to the public, Mr. Speaker. And we know that we still have the deal and we still have to pay by water and climbing. So, and there's a lot of things while old people can get more money for the program. So I get amazed when I hear the talk that we're not at the government, we're just naming what happened. But when you listen to it independently, if you play the tape independently, some of these speeches, this government here is going to be branded as bad. Ain't doing nothing, no vision, no scope, lot of money. But
The good thing is a coin have two sides. So I'm going to get up to say our side. And those there are only some of what I care to mention at this time that we have to meet. This morning, my government members were invited to a board meeting with one of the statutory boards. And all they were doing was holding their head when they went through what the urgent matters are. We left from there urgently needing, with the financial secretary there, $5.8 million with problems that were not touched, that were left there now that has manifested. And it ain't not nice say. All the members sat and listened. And they showed us documents that they were writing saying, if you don't take care of this, this will happen. It's much more than that, you know. The 5.8 is what needed now. Right now. Right now. The board members were the ones speaking over those and the staff showing us the correspondences for the airport. We need $5.8 million right now to deal with some things in the airport to avoid it from shutting down. No new problem since we got there. But you see, when you talk these things and you go on the street, you hear a lot of things, you know. So this is why I'm playing around with this language at all. I don't hear those on the street, and I will hold nobody on the opposite with these things, saying, well, we ain't getting the government run. It's going to fall within 2 years. It's going to fall within 3. Wicked-minded. Want to see us fall. So that they could get their hands on the kitty. And all these problems we dealing with daily. And I start to bring my ministers in because when you come in these forums and you start to say them, you hear all kind of things so. Sometimes when I go back telling my ministers, listen to me, this is the situation we're up against. No, I tell them, not the ministers, I tell all of them come. I just invite them to the meeting now. Come and sit down and listen for yourself. Because we were majoring and doing a lot of things, some of them good. And we maintain none. And all of them come home to roost now that Iris Bar become the premier. This afternoon, one man in West End, when I was down there, he said, Fi, you know, I vote for you all the years, I like you, but I wonder why I put you to be premier in a time like this. I said, don't worry, God will provide. We don't get it done. But we have some plans. It ain't without hope. I was on the other side singing that the financial services could only last, we'd only be able to save up to a certain percentage. When I said that over there, I was ridiculed. I didn't mean it bad neither. I didn't call the government, I just said the facts. Because when you look at it, the Panama paper come out, and they're blaming Panama. Mind you, there's only a leak out of Panama. You know? But they ain't blaming the monies who were the big boys who wasn't in Panama. That money in there. They went scot-free. You will never have an even playing field in this industry. We just need to understand it. And start to build elsewhere. And I want everybody to know that this government have other plans elsewhere. And we're going to bring them piece by piece. I was almost tempted to name some, but I have learned in the premier seat, don't name what you're doing too quick. Because there are some who don't help you to get there. But the minute you turn off to go there, they have all the energy in the world to try to stop you from going. I've seen it. So I'm not going to be tempted stars while I'm going to respect what everyone's saying. I'm not going to be tempted stars with it. Because I know what all we're dealing with. Mr. Speaker, this is why I'm watching even how we go about sorting loans. Because I told the members of this house they want to be informed. We're doing up a booklet to let them to know every single document that we have found. We did a full research with the last 2.5 months by this administration on how come we have such terms and conditions attached to the UK loan, how we got to that position, what all happened, what was agreed. And we're going to give it to all 13
and sit down and read it yourself. Because if I go say it, you'll say that I come in to put people's mind against anybody. Read it yourself. What we're doing now is trying to keep the lion mouth open and get our heads out for the people of the Virgin Islands so that we don't lose this Virgin Islands from what it is we build. But I won't go into depth there with that. The member for the second sermon must talk. But I learned from R.T. O'Neill, timing is everything. You don't talk all too fast. Timing is everything. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that I was also singing for quite a while. The same thing the member for the second was saying, but I was saying in a different way. Prepare your people for what is coming. And I was singing that other song, Police Yourself. Or someone will police you in a manner that we all will regret. We here. And the most amazing thing about where we are, since people drift off of the bill, and I have to go not correct, but give our other side of it, because a man's opinion is his. And I have to respect that. But the most amazing thing about all the things I was there saying in the opposition, police yourself. Prepare the people. Asking about this, asking about that. Now I land here and all them things I got to deal with. The plane. The sewage money that went south. The same lawsuits. What I was telling them, leave alone with some of those things. Global water, what I tell them, don't go into that contract. And I explain why. 90% of what I deal with was what I was over there fighting, saying no. Now I'm dealing with it over here. And there are elements of the opposition who want to give it to me. No, tell me, yeah, I have to deal with it. But we're going to also have to look at the origin. And we have to deal with it to get out of some of these things the best we can. Right now, the Minister of Natural Resources can tell you we involved with some people because of the size of the different lawsuits to ask them to give us payment plans. Because when some of these figures hit the public, we can't afford them up front. And one of our areas to help this territory, as I told all the different social organizations I'm speaking to, is we're going to open up business in the Virgin Islands. A lot of reasons why we are where we are did not have nothing to do with anybody from outside doing it to us. We did it to ourselves. We held back our own people. Those who went up and got the higher positions, rather than bringing our people along, the majority of them went and they kicked the ladder out so they couldn't come up. And they went, and before they tried to use where they are, even in government, some of them, they used where they were to sell us out. Because they had before to be known as friends with those who they were supposed to be there helping protect us from for generations. But they sold us out. And the hurtful thing with it, some of them have been known as heroes up to this day, and they sold us out. And with time, I will explain what I mean by that. So, Mr. Speaker, I understand with this financial services, there are issues. I am not pleased, and I told those involved, to know that the economic substance, and when we took office, this was going on in the budget, knew that they're going to need 32 or 35 staff. And only when we were finishing up the budget is when we start to understand this. And now they're telling you they need it within a certain time. So you have to supply the money. And I told them I was against these things in opposition. I'm not going to continue them in the government, despite I have to pass some of these things. So now you have to get these people in place with a certain time, with a certain skill set to avoid being, we call it when you come to be evaluated, that we don't be evaluated wrong. That's buying in the country hands. And this is something some of those entities have done to us straight through. And then when you look, we have to bring in all manner of other persons. They're buying our hands over the years.
And although as the premier, I'm going to pass this economic substance, But I have concerns just like everybody else, but I ain't leaving them as concerns. I'm going to deal with them. Because I don't take it lightly when people sell out their people. And I'm speaking a parable for a reason, because I'm trying to save the industry or yet speak my mind. It's like walking on glass bottle. So, Mr. Speaker, the next thing is what we have to do in this country is we have to understand that, and I think how the Minister of Education rightfully said it when he was speaking, the paradigm shift. And the government cannot be the be-all anymore. That private sector have to be able to thrive. And we have a lot of investments coming. We have a lot of them without people involved. We send out a lot of RFPs for investments. And one thing on all of them is to make sure that they have locals involved. Because we're trying to make sure that this country grows with all people, not without them. And those who ready for it to grow with them. Mr. Speaker, I want to see all people thrive. I said a time back that I want to see, to make all people millionaires. And when I look, I don't be bothered with certain things, but I smile because it went in the media as this lunatic misunderstand what I was saying. I want to see more of our people, Mr. Speaker, into the entrepreneurship developing. The more of our people that we have here as millionaires, when the storm hits, we don't have to look left or right, they're here. But we have to open it up. We have to take the lid off of a lot of things. That's why we're going into the Trade Commission. That's why we're going into consumer protection. That's why we're going into the incubator for entrepreneurship. These days of deciding who will make it in the BVI is gone. And why ain't gone going? That's the fight I am on. The fight ain't whether I could be premier handling it or not, The fight is the status quo want me to stay with the status quo and don't open the BVI so that every Virgin Islander have a chance. That's where my fight is. And I'm telling them from now that you're not going to get me in that mold of that old status quo. So that people are subservient to you and have to come every minute and beg you if they want something. No, I want to get my people elevated. And that's why we're doing the Financial Services Institute. We budgeted $400,000 to revitalize or restart the Financial Services Institute. Why, Mr. Speaker? Because I saw that our people were being sidelined. And when that starts in the next couple of weeks, Mr. Speaker, all our people can go up there and be a part of that program once again and find their place inside the financial services industry. And might I add, there are other areas in financial services industry that I'll be bringing to the House with some legislation that we have found how to get more revenue. Or not out of the companies, but in different angles. But I ain't ready to say them yet. So it ain't without a plan. Not without a plan at all. And we're not going to let all those revenues go how they used to go. Because when I talk about the money services, some jump up, no, this, that, the other. But we're going to make sure a percentage of those monies go to a targeted entity. Because once it ends in the pot of the consolidated fund, everybody have a need all of a sudden. And they go with the money. Then you don't have enough for scholarships. You don't have enough for entrepreneurship. You don't have enough to help the people who want to get first-time homes and first-time landowners, Virgin Islanders. You don't have enough for the same seniors. You don't have enough for certain things because all the funds went into the consolidated pot. So what you end up seeing, Mr. Speaker, which I told the public service this since I went as premier, you can't have a recurrent up to $330-something million. It cannot work. And I'm telling those in charge of the public service, you have to retool and restructure, not for you, but based on where the country is going. We have some legislation coming for statutory bodies to make sure that all the statutory bodies adhere to certain rules and meet all the time. And to meet with also the tourist board when we pass a national tourism plan, which is going to be soon, so that everybody, every statutory body in heads of government understand the one plan because of the unit that we're going to create. And we're talking about a unit where they're going to get any more money. Just talking about in terms of the body that we'll create to be meeting. Because everybody in the Virgin Islands who walking, going in their own way. Because that's where leadership comes in. And we are most finished writing that policy, that act. We are most finished writing the Procurement Act to improve it and certain areas. So I'm not there sitting down. I told the Attorney General already, and some don't agree. I tell them, listen, we need an attorney in some of these ministries. It cannot work in the old-time way. Because we have urgencies, we have to get things done now. And it is no offense to my learned Attorney General friend here next to me and the staff. I love them. But it is too much, the capacity is too much. Then they're saying, well, all right, give me the attorneys and land them inside the Attorney General office. But you don't put new wine in old wine skin. The Bible teaches me that, so why are you going to do that now? So we're going to be doing certain things different. A lot of persons why you hear grumbling from us ain't grumbling because we ain't doing it, because we ain't doing it how they're accustomed to seeing it being done, where one or two people could be the boss all the time. Yes, that word boss. But I could guarantee you, Mr. Speaker, that we're planning for the shortfall that is expected in financial services. Somebody's going to take a while. But I could guarantee, Mr. Speaker, as much as I could speak, every night I put my head down on my bed and wake up. I pray to God to get a wisdom to run this Virgin Islands. I am not ignorant to talk, but over the 20 years I've heard so much thing about me that I gall to the talk. Because I know my heart pure, my hands clean. I ain't saying that like everybody else, you make some mistakes. But I don't let man mouth get to me because it was predicted that I wouldn't be here as premier. So now that I'm here, them same mouth are grabbing in and get me through off of what Lord sent me here to do. Because they had done predict with their mouth the status quo that he could never be the premier of the country. I know it has some of them staying up late now saying we have to get him out. But they didn't put me in. This is the problem. God put me here. So those who are up by night just plotting, I will repeat for them that when destruction is your motivation, your motivation will become your destruction. And I don't mind us challenging the financial services, but not to the point where we want to destroy just to get this government down. I wouldn't stand for that. Mr. Speaker, I want to see certain things done differently with financial services, and I'm telling them in-house. And I've told some of them that there are some new areas that I want to go into, and they were fighting me at first, some of them. And I told them the same thing. I heard, I think a leader of opposition has said, and the Minister of Education, both of them I heard saying this. I told them that if persons had the same attitude that some of you have for some of the new areas, I'm telling you, if persons who are doing the financial services had that same attitude, we won't have it right now. We have to move into new wealth. It is as simple as that. And the one well that we have, we will maintain what we can maintain out of it, make it better, try to see the new areas with it, but it cannot accommodate all the needs of the people of the Virgin Islands. So we have to go into new wells. Mr. Speaker, I said that to say, when I brought up about the cruise industry and speaking to them about employment and the different cruise lines, which we're working on legislation now with that also, because the FCCA said that there's certain legislation they want in place. I know that some of our people will never work on a cruise ship. But that's not where this government is going. You're creating a plethora of opportunities so that people have choices. We might go and do this deal, and you might look, and only 20 people from the VI ever go to work on a cruise ship. But at least there are 20 who have a meaningful job. So, Mr. Speaker, when we go into these areas and many other areas that we're doing, it is to allow our people to thrive. Because an old man in my village told me here someday, and I took that to heart. He said, Foy, when the time comes for you to leave the premier seat and politics, make sure the decisions that you made, that you can sit down between us and the people of the Virgin Islands comfortably, because we were pleased of your efforts. Not that you have to hide from us and go live somewhere else, because you know what you did us was an injustice. And that's what his advice to me when I went to look for him, because I didn't see him in a while. He said, this is my advice to you. Go where the Lord lead you. Help the people. You can't help all. You can't do what everyone wants you to do. But do what God wants you to do. Come up with the ideas. That's why when we launched the 1,000 job in 1,000 days on August 12th, I think is the day, is a program there to my heart. Because we're going to make sure, that's just the jobs, but we're going to make sure that our people, everyone will want to be employed, as we said from Anagaza Johnson Lakes, and we're stopping in every single district. Every district rep going to be invited to come with it in the at-large and register all Virgin Islander who is not belongers, who are not working, and in terms of especially our young people, and try to link them up with some of the companies who have already registered with us, saying that they will take some of them. It's important because the needs of our people are great. I also going to start to speak to heavier conversations with our banks. Yes, we don't regulate them no more, they're regulated under FSC. But there's some issues there that they have to do better with. Some of them just don't care. Some of them doing their best. But as a leader, I can't sit down there comfortable worrying about that. I told electricity we have to find how to get electricity cheaper and retrain and retool some of the persons to do some of the new technology and into some new areas. Because we want the consumer bill to be lowered so that that disposable income can be greater so they could do more things for their family. That's what this government is about. In the cost of living, there's many things that we're doing in that area, but today we are just dealing with the beneficial ownership secure system, such system amendment. But I had to say those things, Mr. Speaker, because although we're dealing with this bill, a lot was set out in the angle and make it seem that there's no hope and no plans. I would say it's not plans that some on the status quo would say would approve. But then their thinking got us to where we are. So let's try something else. And Mr. Speaker, the one thing that I heard a member for the Second Seven, he was speaking to the Minister of Health, he said that he had a girlfriend and she leave him and she go with the Minister for Health, or he take her, is now his. This is the problem, Mr. Speaker. Everybody looking at who she for, who she'll be for at that time. But nobody ain't stopping to say, well, my son, let me get the right criteria in place so that whoever comes to me will be according to the criteria that I know will uplift my purpose for being here. Because once you have them criteria, either the Minister of Health won't take her, nor the member for the second would have had her. The reason that the lady were playing around, which is a political lady, and I don't want to use lady because the territorial large member I hear tonight, so she don't jump up. But the reason that we talk in these language but pass on is because what is being passed on should have never been there to pass on.
because we went away from all the principles, all the regulations in government. They exist no more. Sometimes when I call and see what people are doing, I ask them, how could you do that? They tell me we've been doing that. I said the financial regulation doesn't allow for that. And if you listen to people, you'll think I'm the one who have them doing it. So what being passed on is what we have to halt. That's why we have the protocols. And that's why we have the high-level framework. So, Mr. Speaker, we have our work cut out for us. I don't have no doubt about that. And the last thing I'll say is that we're going to fight for our people, Mr. Speaker, through other means to uplift them with procurement, with how to deal with certain things. Because there's one thing to get loan money and just go do things. But then when you look, none of our people benefit from that loan money. So people think that politicians want to get a hand on the money. Not at all. You want to build your people. But if we tender and go for major loans and tender and none of our people win that loan, we will be physically resilient, but fiscally deficient. And I don't want to see my people fiscally deficient. Because after God, grace is money. And if your people don't have the money, and you as a leader don't work it out so that they could have an opportunity to have the money, then you'll have a problem. So, Mr. Speaker, I present those there just as a balance, because I respect the members' view, just as a balance with these few words. And I leave this bill here now entitled The Boss. And I agree with the member for the second, and if I had my way, she would never name the boss. But we have it, we're too far out going. So, but this is important, Mr. Speaker. And I've called my colleagues in the other areas through the Caribbean, OTs, and all of them working on this. This is nothing independent. Some already done pass it. Most already pass it. And not because everybody doing it, we have to do it. But remember something too, we have more to lose in the financial services in this area than anybody else. So we have to do more protection than normal. And one thing I must say about governments after governments, I must give kudos, is there's no other jurisdiction more well regulated than the Virgin Islands. None. Those who come down on us, not even half the regulation. And I hate to hear the word blacklist. How could you blacklist a set of Caribbean people? That alone is a racist statement. So with that, Mr. Speaker, we'll continue to educate our people and bring them along. And I want to put out for any one of our persons, because we're going to recruit in a public way for those 32 or 35 people for the International Tax Authority. So I'm sounding the warning now to the public service, recruit in the most public way for those persons that are needed in the industry now because of the international pressures. So to see how many of our people that are here. And when I say so, all our people are here, of Virgin Islanders first, and then anyone else who are among us, to see if they have the qualifications to get them in those 32 or 35 jobs. So do not think those who are involved that are going to sit back as premier like old time when these things happened before, we just bring in a whole horde of people. I'm not going to do it. I'm be watching it keenly, and you're going to make sure that you advertise in every online. You're going to advertise in every newspaper. You're going to advertise on the Facebook. You're going to send it out WhatsApp, so as many of our people that are qualified get those jobs. Enough of this nonsense. Rushing, and bringing people, and our people even don't have an opportunity. And then we end up further behind. Usually haste some
usually makes waste. So let's move fast but take our time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I thank the mover of the bill, the Honorable Premier Minister of Finance, for his summary and wrap-up of the bill. It has been moved and seconded that the bill shortly entitled Beneficial Ownership Secure Search System Amendment Number 2, Act 2019, be now read a second time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. I call on the clerk to read the bill for a second time.
This act may be cited as the Beneficial Ownership Secure Search System Amendment Number 2, Act 2019.
Pursuant to Standing Order 55-1 of the House of Assembly of the Virgin Islands, the bill now stands committed to a committee of the whole House to consider it clause by clause. This House is now in committee.
a third time and pass, which it doesn't have any amendments.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill entitled Beneficial Ownership Secure Search System Amendment Number 2, Act 2019, be now read a third time and passed.
You second. No, that one there.
Oh.
That one there. No.
Well, according to the... Yes, it needs a seconded.
The last part?
Yeah, page 5 of the...
Let's go.
Mr. Speaker, I move to second the motion.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded that the bill entitled, follow me members, Beneficial Ownership Secure Search System Amendment Number 2, Act 2019, be now read a third time and pass. Those in favor? Those against? The motion is passed. I call on the clerk to read the bill a third time.
This act may be cited as the Beneficial Ownership Secure Search System Amendment Number 2, Act 2019.
The bill entitled Beneficial Ownership Secure Search System Amendment 2, Act 2019 is now passed and read a third time without amendments. And then the Speaker signs the bill. Yeah. Okay, I call now on the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise on Section 65 in the standing orders, which deals with withdrawal of motions or items on the order paper. So, Mr. Speaker, given that section number 65, I will now move that the items from item on the order paper, that item 8, which is 9 and 10, be removed from the order of the day, Mr. Speaker, and I will ask that they be placed automatically on the next sitting of the House of Assembly.
Is there a second?
Mr. Speaker, I rise to second the motion.
The motion has been moved and seconded that in keeping with Standing Order 65, items 9 and 10 on the order of the day be removed from the agenda. Those in favor? Those against? The motion is carried. I call on the Premier.
Speaker, the members of the House have said since this festival that they would like to adjourn a little earlier. So, Mr. Speaker, with your kind permission, because it is your honorable House and we are functioning in the hollow walls of your honorable House. So we crave your indulgence, Mr. Speaker, if we can recess the House, Mr. Speaker, and come back after the festival break to finish the lighter matters.
The House is going to be in recess. We will continue the same sitting on Thursday coming at 10 a.m. Thursday is what date, Madam Clerk? The 7th? The 8th. So the House will stand in recess until Thursday, the 8th of July, 2019, tentatively. If there's any changes to that, August. If there's any changes to that date, we will so advise members. So the House stands in recess until the 9th. Thursday, you can tell I'm hungry. Thursday, 8th of August, 2019 at 10 a.m. This House is now in recess.